kingdom of heaven. Held a festival for thousands of stars. I went up to the kingdom, knelt down and prayed that the anguish, the killing, the disaster in our poor land would end. Where have you been, little star? I've been looking for you everywhere, out of my window, among the dark clouds. Where have you been, little star? I feel so forlorn, like a small bird lost on a foggy island. It has been raining for night, late night on the sidewalk. I see the silhouette of lonely red forms. I've tried to call your image from deep in my consciousness, while the rain and the wind continue to rage. Tonight as I bend over my desk, my head in my two hands, the wind has carried all the clouds away. The sky is clear, the rain has stopped, longing for your call. I'm surprised to see you there, you have returned, little star.
I've been looking at the stars in the distance. I've been looking in my heart for resistance. I've been searching in the self for existence. All alone by myself, reminiscing underneath the Bodhi tree. But it isn't only me, you and I, collective energy. How it's supposed to be. I hope to be the ocean tide with my spirit open wide, standing on a mountaintop, see the world with open eyes.
I was so surprised to know that I'm a part of this. Sunrise, sunset, rain clouds, all of it. The journey of awakening, taking it with one step, one breath. Save all beings till there's none left. Suffering is painful, but I'm still the same fool, searching for the river while I'm swimming in the same pool.
Maybe we can find it, keep the light shining, walking on the path of ancestors behind me. If you could be the person who you are in your heart,
Would you grow a little bit?
or would you play a bigger part?
Love is a paintbrush, life is the biggest art, and I'm still the same kid, wishing on a little star. Love is a paintbrush, life is the biggest art, and I'm still the same kid, wishing on a little star.
Little star, I've been looking for you everywhere, out of my window, among the dark clouds. Where have you been, little star? I feel so forlorn, like a small bird lost on a foggy island. It has been raining for night, late night on the sidewalk. I see the silhouette of lonely red forms. I've tried to call your image from deep in my consciousness, while the rain and the wind continue to rage. Dear little star, you have been through the storms, rain and wind. For how long and on what strange land have you been weeping? You've come back, your little body still shivers with cold, with tears in your eyes. You recall you've been praying for our homeland. are, you are back home. With tears in my eyes, I call your name and feel the warmth in my heart.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to our introduction to trauma-informed mindfulness workshop, the intro workshop for the Embrace Sangha. You might be part of the listserv, or you might have got this forwarded from a friend, but either way, we are glad that you are here today. So thank you for joining. My name is Eric Giko, he, him, his pronouns. I am one of the caretaking council members of the Embrace group. And a little bit about Embrace before we introduce our facilitators for today. So Embrace started because, as we all know, Thich Nhat Hanh and the Plum Village tradition have been very supportive in and I'm going to say for myself, my personal growth throughout my time, and has been so supportive. And then there's times where mindfulness practices, and especially sometimes sitting meditation for someone like me who can be kind of anxious sometimes, it was really challenging. And so sometimes and there was this idea of, yeah, something must be wrong with me if I'm not doing this right. But through this practice, through learning about a little bit more about the neuroscience of it and the trauma-informed, becoming more trauma-informed, I've been actually enjoying my practice more, sitting more, and it's been even more powerful and mature than it has been. And so this has been near and dear to myself and my practice. And so we would hopefully you're here because you want to learn more, and hopefully we can give you the introduction to it. This is just the first part of what Embrace offers. And if you, so thank you for making it. If you want to in the future, there are some study groups that will be happening in January of 2024, a little bit after, so as they prep for the next round of study groups that delves into this deeper. But we'll get there when we get there. But for now, know that you're taking that first step here, or not the first step, but the first step with the Embrace. So with that, we will also, I'll have Cheryl and An introduce themselves as well. So An, you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you for the intro, Eric. So hello, Sangha. My name is An, and my Dharma name is True Continuation of Mindfulness. I've been a Plum Village practitioner since 2015. I was born and raised in Vietnam, and now I'm residing in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA, where I'm a part of Peaceful Garden Sangha as well as the Wake Up Boston Sangha. I was part of the Embrace study cohort in 2021, and since then have been a part of other Embrace initiatives, such as co-creating this workshop. So, thank you.
Thank you, An. And Cheryl, would you like to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Hello, Sangha. My name's Cheryl, and my Dharma name is Authentic Freedom of the Heart. So I first encountered Plum Village practice at a retreat with Thai in Hong Kong in 2010 rather. I live in Nelson, New Zealand, and I'm part of the Nelson Sangha and the New Zealand OIA Sangha. I was part of the Embrace 2021 study group as well, and I've been involved in other projects since then. quite nervous right now. This is my first time at this, and I've been practicing, but I know you'll be kind because you're practitioners. And I'm here because at times I've really struggled with the practice, and trying harder made it worse. So learning this information's meant I could continue in this tradition, and it means a lot to me that you're here. Thank you. So now I'd invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, something maybe that you love about being alive on Earth, and a quality of yourself, a positive quality that you'd like to share. So I can start. The thing I love most about being alive is being with the people that I love, and a positive quality is my compassion. And the instructions are there in the chat now. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great. Good to see some familiar names and some New Zealand names for me. Lovely, lovely to know there's hopeful. Hi Rachel, thank you. Lots of love of the sun and the sound of the wind in the trees, and caring and discovering. Hello from Dharmagaya. Hello to you. Yeah, I really know that persistence is necessary in this path. Some lovely positive qualities showing up in the chat. Yeah, such gratitude for Thai in the practice. I really like glorious.
Oh, it sounds like a lot of people got some introductions in, or most people. Are we ready to move on to the next slide? Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to hear um, a little bit from each of our friends who are here in the workshop. And so, actually, before we begin everything, I would just like to caveat that we are, although presenters for this workshop, we are not mental health professionals. So, we are people who have gone through the Embrace intro workshop similar to this, or study group cohorts where we read books about trauma sensitive mindfulness. And we've benefited from learning about these practices and applying them into our own practice. So, with that, this workshop is meant to not just be information, but also opportunities for us to put these techniques into practice, to really see and feel how it is in our bodies and in our minds when we put these techniques into use. And so the first technique that we are going to try is finding our personal anchor. So this will be a guided meditation. So I would like to invite you to just settle into a comfortable sitting position. Take a deep breath, stretch out, stretch your neck, stretch your arms, stretch your legs. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Smile. You can relax your face. And yeah, you can settle into a position where you feel grounded but still alert. So this short meditation is an introduction to the concept of the choice of focus of attention, or anchors, during sitting meditation. So with each of these anchors introduced, I invite you to just notice how your body feels with each anchor, and how your sense of ease and stability and your concentration or your ability to hold attention increase or decrease with each anchor. We'll have a sound of the bell to start. So finding ourselves in a comfortable position where we feel stable and supported. Whatever feels right for you, having eyes open or closed, however you are the most at ease. And now, inviting you to just notice your breath and the sensations of the breath going in and out. Perhaps as it enters and leaves your body at your nostrils, or at your chest expanding and contracting, or maybe at your abdomen rising and falling. And if thoughts come and go as they do, just notice and watch them go, and gently return to your breath, this anchor. And if this feels pleasant or neutral, or gives ease and stability, and you can stay with the breath for a few more moments. And now, inviting you to shift your attention to your body in contact, supported, perhaps your feet on the ground, or maybe your back against the chair, or your seat on the cushion, maybe your hands in your lap, or just the sensation of the contact of the air of clothing on your skin. And your breath perhaps is still in your awareness, but in the background now, as attention is on the body as your anchor. And if this feels pleasant or neutral and gives ease and stability, you can stay with bodily contact for a few more moments. And now, shifting your attention to the sounds that are present. No need to name them, just noticing, allowing the sounds entering your awareness to anchor your attention. And if this feels pleasant or neutral and gives ease and stability, you can stay with sounds for a few more moments. And lastly, perhaps gently opening your eyes if they're closed. You can look around your space slowly and finding an object that catches your eye, that brings you a sense of well-being. Perhaps a plant or a view outside the window. And stopping there without naming the object, just seeing, with the breath perhaps in the background and attention on what's before you, staying with that object as your anchor. And if this feels pleasant or neutral and gives ease and stability, you can stay with what you're seeing for a few more moments. And now, with the sound of the bell, opening your eyes if they've been closed and looking around your space, and perhaps stretching and shifting your body if it wants to. And then when you're ready, you can bring your attention back to all of us here in the Zoom room. Thank you for practicing together, and I'll hand it off to Cheryl.
Thank you, Anne. That first practice, finding your personal anchor, is not necessarily to replace our traditional focus on breath, but it can be an alternative for the times when the breath is destabilizing, or if it's just not bringing us ease, and that can happen from time to time. So on this slide, we have a workshop overview, and that's an important trauma-informed concept from the start to provide an overview of what to expect. So our intention with this workshop is to offer a basic understanding of trauma-informed principles and ways we can use them in our Plum Village practice. We'll start with some definitions and how they relate to our Plum Village practice. We'll have some short experiences of ways we can make our practice more trauma-informed. And at the end, there'll be time for questions with the recording off. During the workshop, you'll probably notice feelings of well-being and ill-being arising in relation to what we're talking about or doing. And we'll talk about ways to re-regulate ourselves, some suggestions for the start, to take a breath if that works for you. Open your eyes as we did in that last practice. Have a drink. Stand up, perhaps moved. You don't have to stay still. We'd really like you to experiment with ways that you can cater for your own practice needs, not feel you have to stick to the rules. We'd prefer you to stay on screen so that we can see you and connect. But if you need to, feel free to go off camera for a little while. And we'll be occasionally checking in so we can co-regulate as a group. So next slide, please, Eric. So we're starting with some definitions. And today we're talking about trauma and the window of tolerance. So on the next slide, we're starting with the first definition we have of trauma. There are a number of definitions that are possible, and today we're talking about two. So this one is toxic stress, things that can make the nervous system become dysregulated. So here, there's three pathways in this model: too much, too fast, too little for too long, and too much for too long. So the first one, too much, too fast, is probably familiar to all of us. That can be things like having a car accident, an earthquake, getting sudden bad news. Too little for too long and too much for too long are a little bit different. They don't seem so acute, and often we don't even know that they're trauma. So this could include things like developmental trauma, say child neglect or child abuse. Could be cumulative effects of things like bullying, racism, and homophobia. But like dripping water on a stone, even though they're not acute at the start, like the dripping water, they can have profound effects on the nervous system. And yet we often don't recognise that they're trauma. So I'll pass it back to Anne to talk about the next.
Yeah, so Another way that we describe trauma is by the intensity, the level of impact on the person and the nervous system. So we have big T trauma, which corresponds to the too much, too fast type that Cheryl just mentioned, which is major events like natural disasters, war, sexual assaults, child abuse, acts of terrorism and violence. Next, we have little t, small t trauma. And small t traumas are labeled as such not because the person experienced them as a minor event. The individual may experience something we think of as small t as a large T event. But these could be a dental procedure, a dog bite, a routine surgery, a fall, or a minor car accident. And finally, we have cumulative trauma, or C trauma, and this corresponds to the too long, too little too long, or even too much too long, which is trauma that occurs over a period of time and builds over time. So this, similar to what Cheryl has mentioned, includes developmental trauma, the impact of colonialism, structural racism, microaggressions of homophobia and racism, collective and historical trauma of losing one's culture and language, the effects of poverty. So, for example, living with racism, not knowing if you're accepted by others, or even if your life could be in danger because of the color of your skin, that can create a cascade of physical and emotional reactions that may be experienced daily and have cumulative effects. Next slide, please, Eric. So a question may arise here that, why do we need to use the term trauma? Like, we're a Buddhist, so can't we just let go of the word trauma and use suffering? Like, we could use suffering for everything, so why don't we do that? Well, the answer for us is that trauma is a kind of suffering, but not all suffering is trauma. So as we saw in the previous slide, there's a vast continuum when it comes to the intensity of stress responses. Smaller stressors like the small annoyances of everyday life, like misplacing your keys or something like that, may still be considered suffering. There's some unpleasantness, there's maybe a little bit of stress, but you can probably, with some practice, embrace that emotion with mindfulness, or as Tay would say, as a mother would embrace a baby. But for trauma, this is when intense thoughts and emotions kick in and take over, usually when there's no outside threat to warrant such a response. And the nature of the response may be overwhelming, such that you aren't able to embrace these emotions as easily as the smaller stressors. And so as the stress response becomes more intense, we need more skill to rebalance our dysregulated nervous system and to bring the mother back online. And so the value of naming something as trauma has to do with being able to provide a more specific approach in support and validation for these cases. And when these responses are to stressors or events in our lives are contained within the window of tolerance, then we can observe it and learn how it was made and eventually become less activated in its presence. And this is the process of healing, when the automatic response doesn't get you stuck outside of the window anymore. And more about the window in the next slide. Yeah, so window of tolerance. This is our next definition. So the window of tolerance, it has other names also. It's called the zone of resilience or the OK zone. In Embrace, we also sometimes call it the window of opportunity, because this is where we can best stretch and learn and transform. And the window of tolerance was conceptualized by the psychologist Dan Siegel. And when we are in this window of tolerance, we can still have a range of feelings. We're not always calm or happy. We can be sad, angry, worried, excited, frustrated, stressed in response to what is happening in life or our thoughts, the state of our body, but we are basically okay. So these emotions aren't overwhelming us. We can be mindful of them and embrace them and take care of them. Next slide, please, Eric. However, sometimes stuff happens and we get bumped out of our window of tolerance. And so you can see in this diagram here, there's this band that says optimal, and then there's a line that goes above and below that. And so when we were out of the window on the top, you see the label that says hyperarousal. So this is when our nervous system is in a state of hyperarousal, and we can feel agitated, anxious, angry, irritable, and reactive. And then below the window, our nervous system is in hypoarousal, and we have decreased energy. We're tired, we can feel low or depressed, and we begin to shut down. So based on these descriptions, raise your hand if you've ever been bumped out of your window. Oh, it's all of us. Great. So it's, so it happens. So now you know, you're not alone when this happens. There's at least a whole Zoom room full of people who've had the same experience. This happens to all of us. And for the most part, we have our practice, we have our ways to regulate, and we can get back into our window easily. And our Plum Village practices are an important element of that. And next slide, please. So live events can bump us into the high or the low. This is the only slide, I think, with some snazzy animation, so I hope you enjoyed it while it lasted. So live events can bump us into high or low, above or below the window, and get us stuck there. So these events can be a reminder of a past traumatic or stressful event. This reminder can arise during our meditation or daily life or other practices. And if we get bumped out of the window for too long, so above the window, we can become hypervigilant, fearful. We can have panic attacks or be full of rage, be highly overreactive, and even experience physical pain. And if we spend too much time below the window, that can result in us feeling depressed, feeling disconnected and alienated, exhausted, hopeless, or dull or numb. And when this happens, yes, we have our breath and our practice to help us get back into the window, but we may have trouble using the practice or our breath at that time to come back into the window. And this is because the parts of the brain and nervous system that feel safe, calm, and that can focus are no longer available. And instead, the parts that are watching out for our safety are vigilant, responding to the felt sense of threat, have taken over. So windows of tolerance can also have varying widths for different people, or for each of us at different times, depending on the causes and conditions. So if you have narrow windows, you can be habitually quick to react or withdraw, or even as the same person, we know that if we're tired or hungry, or we are under pressure, we may also be more reactive. So we have narrower windows of tolerance during those times. And many of our Plum Village practices, including our sense of community, slowing down, paying attention in gratitude to our food, to nature, and to each other, all of those practices can help to widen our windows. So I'll hand it up to Cheryl.
Thank you. So we're coming now to the next part of the trauma-informed skills, resourcing, also known in Plum Village practices as watering seeds of well-being. So the next slide, please, Eric. This slide shows us a little bit of information about resourcing or watering positive seeds. So there's 3 things there. A resource can be any person, place, thing, memory, or part of yourself that makes you feel calm, pleasant, peaceful, strong, or resilient. A resource can be real or imagined, and it could be internal or external. So examples of internal resources could be picturing something in your mind or a feeling that you have in your body. that you like to enjoy. External can be things like the things you can see, hear, touch, etc. Maybe a person you can call on for support. Some ideas for resources are a memory, an object, a pet, a spiritual teacher or bodhisattva, maybe that positive quality in yourself you mentioned earlier, or the thing you love about being alive on earth. These are seeds of well-being, and it's important to counteract, to pay attention to them, because that helps to counteract our natural negativity bias. So hopefully we all know some Plum Village practices that are regulating for us. For me, something like a hand on the heart or feeling the support of the earth works really well. So let's all take a moment to think about what works for us, what we know works for us, and if you like, you could put some in the chat. If you can't think of one, you might think about one you would wish to have in the future. Or you can borrow ideas from the chat. This is the fun part of being in a group. So go ahead and list any that you can think of. Yeah, pet. And plants, a swim, a walk, music, lots of good music. Yeah. The face of a favourite person. Wonderful. Belly laughs, I like that. Yeah, and playing. Thank you. There are some great ideas there. Keep them coming. Yeah, listening to music, playing music, gardening, beauty, singing, lots of good singing. Yeah. Standing on the earth barefoot is really grounding. I like that. Gratitude is a really good one. Yeah. And a cup of tea. You bet. Yes. So it's good to see that there are so many resources, both around us and within our practice, that people can use when we need them. Even ice cream, okay. And so, Eric, I wonder, I think we have a bio break coming up next. If you can. Yeah, so it's good after doing some practice and doing some thinking and listening, hearing ideas, to take a short break. So we're going to take 5 minutes. Invite you to inhabit your body if you've forgotten it's there, and just do what you need to do. And let's be back here on screen in 5 minutes, and feel free to turn your video off and mute your sound if you might be making a noise. Thank you. That's great. I'm sure you're feeling refreshed. So now we'll do a short guided practice in resourcing ourselves. And I'll invite a bell for us to start. So please find yourself a comfortable position where your body feels stable. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever is most comfortable, knowing that you can change them if you want to. Now bringing to mind one of those resources that you selected before, just picking out one of them. And focusing on that resource in your mind, or if it's with you in your environment or out in the room or outside your window, really paying attention to it. What are you perceiving? The colours, the scene, the faces, the taste, a good smell, sounds, a hand in yours, and just being with that experience in this moment for a few breaths. And now inviting you to gently shift your attention to your body. Noticing how your body feels while being with that resource. Are there places in your body that have relaxed a bit? Sensations that are pleasant or neutral? Spending a little time now noticing the sensations and where they are in your body. Now in your mind, bring up a few more details of that resource. If it's a person or pet, maybe some happy moments you've had together, or how you were feeling, good times and feelings. And if not so good or sad thoughts and feelings are also coming up, as can happen, gently shifting the attention back to the positive feelings and thoughts for now, and staying with them. Now shifting your attention again to the sensations in your body. in your chest, your breathing, your heart rate, is it fast or slow? How do your shoulders feel? Your face, other places in your body. Is anything tight or loose? The temperature you notice. Is your skin warm or cool? Just noticing. And asking yourself gently, are the sensations in your body pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant? If they're pleasant or neutral, staying with those. And if some are unpleasant, as can happen, just see if you can gently shift your attention to the part of your body and sensations that feel pleasant or neutral. Right now, we're just wanting to stay with what's feeling okay. So if it's nourishing, stay with your resource and those pleasant or neutral sensations for a bit longer. And lastly, bringing your awareness to your whole body, noticing how your whole body feels, and perhaps any changes that have occurred since we began this practice of focusing on a resource. And when you're ready, opening your eyes if they've been closed, and looking around you at what you can see, and then coming back into the Zoom room. Thank you for practicing with that. So how was this? And is anyone willing to share their experience of this practice with everyone in the chat or with voice? Some things you might consider, were you able to access a resource and keep it there for a while? Would you like to share what it was? Body sensations, thoughts and feelings? Remembering that this experience might have been supportive for some, but not for others. So if you want to put a few ideas into the chat, you're welcome to do that now. Yeah, it's really important to attend to both pleasant and unpleasant. Yeah, and they can interbe. And it is a really good feeling to know that we can choose where we put our attention. We have that option. we're used to noticing our thoughts and feelings most of the time, but what we're doing here is also about noticing and paying attention to body sensations. And this can be new for some of us, it certainly was for me. So these resourcing practices, finding seeds of well-being, watering and cultivating them, are available to us whenever we need them, in both meditation and in the rest of life, to help us get back into our window if we notice we're getting close to the edge or we've got bumped out. And yeah, sometimes we can become aware of things that are not so pleasant. When we're wanting to practice resourcing, we can say if there is a part of the body that does feel pleasant or neutral and put our attention there. These are really lovely, thank you. Yeah. So I pass back to Anne now. Thank you for all of your observations.
Thank you, Cheryl. So now that we have given you some definitions about trauma-sensitive mindfulness, it's time to bring that back and connect it to our Plum Village practice. Answering questions like, what are the ways in which Plum Village practice can widen our window of tolerance? What are the ways in which they can bump us out of our windows? And when that happens, how do we apply the trauma-informed principles to support ourselves as we practice in this tradition? So next slide, please. As we all know, and as we definitely have experienced, otherwise we would not be here, Plum Village practices can be very regulating to our nervous system, bringing us peace and ease, bringing us back into the window of tolerance when we are bumped too high or too low. And so many of these practices we already know. Our Plum Village communities and Sanghas already do them. Much of our practice is trauma-informed. So let's take a moment in the chat here. Can we share in the Zoom chat box just one Plum Village practice that we have personally found calming? So you can go ahead and share in the chat. Metta, walking meditation, singing together, definitely. It's very unique to Plum Village. Total relaxation and walking, lots of singing, breathing meditation, mindful eating, inviting the bell, singing. Singing, sitting meditation, walking, practicing together in community. Listening to the bell. Total relaxation, noble silence. Chiming of the clock. Thank you for those sharings. They're all practices we know and love and have brought us peace and calm in some moment or another. And so from the very roots of our practice, the Buddha's teachings, like right diligence, paying attention to the wholesome seeds, or the ordering of the 16 exercises of mindful breathing, specifically paying attention to the body and gladdening the mind before looking deeply at feelings that may be painful, are all ways of making sure we have enough safety and nourishment before delving deeply into the painful parts of our lives. And our Plum Village tradition also has trauma-informed roots. Our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, developed our engaged Buddhist practices from his experience of trauma and suffering in the Vietnam War, and subsequently his exile. And Thay's book The Miracle of Mindfulness, was written for many young people in the School of Social Services, going into the villages, dealing on a daily basis with danger, death, and destruction, and needing to remain stable and clear-minded and compassionate at the same time as they offer healing and rebuilding to others. And you might already know of the story of Tay in Singapore, trying to save 1,000 boat people on the Roland. He and Sister Chun Kong tried to save these refugees. All avenues for the rescue appeared to have vanished, and they could not think of a way out, and they were stuck in despair. So Tay did walking meditation all night. And thanks to that practice, he was able to find stability and clarity. And in the morning, he was able to orchestrate the rescue of the refugees, and he brought them to safety. So I'd like to read to you a quote from Tay about that time. If you don't practice sitting meditation, walking meditation, you'd become insane. You cannot be yourself, you cannot help. And that very night, my office was surrounded by the police. At midnight, they came and confiscated our passports. Sister Chun Kong was there. Her French passport was confiscated also. I hold a refugee passport. And they gave us the order to leave the country in 24 hours. How can you do that while almost 1,000 boat people are still your responsibility? Very difficult. So from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, we all practiced walking meditation. Walking meditation is not a luxury. It is to still be yourself, to find the way. So from Tay's practices, and I'm sure from yours as well, we know practices like walking meditation in nature, walking together as a community rather than in isolation, having a day of mindfulness in the week, no matter what, smiling when you meditate, deep belly breathing, holding feelings like a baby, chanting and singing in community, and many more. These are some trauma-informed practices that Tay has offered to us that are already embedded in our Plum-British community. And in the last 20 years or so, science has also explored and documented in terms of what happens in the brain, the nervous system, and the whole body when we do these practices. And our Plum-British community has also held several neuroscience retreats. Many monastics and lay teachers have also explored the intersection between Plum Village practice and neuroscience. So we can move on to the next slide. So Plum Village practices can also be dysregulating, meaning that at times they can take us out of the window of tolerance. And this can happen even for seasoned practitioners. So sometimes in meditation, simply stopping and paying attention to what is happening inside can be problematic, as the silence and the internal focus on the breath can leave room for thoughts and traumatic memories or related body reactions to emerge. And these trauma-related reactions can come up quite suddenly during practices in response to either sensory cues, what is being said in a guided meditation, and depending on your past experiences, certain words, certain sensory cues, and attention to certain internal sensation can be triggering. So I can share a personal example of this. I live in Boston in the East Coast of the US, and I usually go to Blue Cliff Monastery to practice. And this happened quite a few years ago. I was on a personal retreat there in winter, and it was dinner time, a silent dinner. And the outside was really dark, already really dark, and I found myself getting food and sitting alone at a table. And not by, it was just by coincidence. It was the personal retreat, so there weren't as many people, so everyone was kind of spread out, set at their own spaces. And somehow the combination of the darkness from the outside and sitting alone at the table when other long-term friends or the sisters were at other tables, they're not talking or interacting or anything, but just somehow the feeling of they being over there while I'm over here and everyone is silent. The situation suddenly just brought a dip in my mood. and I was gloomy and depressed very suddenly. And the present moment felt at that time very isolating and even threatening. So when I look at other practitioners, there's this feeling of fear, like I was being ostracized or willfully ignored in some way, even though it was not the case at all. And so reflecting on that moment, I realized that just the combination of causes and conditions, the cold weather, me sitting alone, everyone sitting and eating silently, that brought up memory of me being in boarding school in high school. And there were many lonely moments like that of being away from my family and not having many friends yet. So so that was interesting because actually I've always enjoyed practice eating in silence. But somehow the same activity of eating silently in those certain situations brought up these difficult emotions. I did not know about trauma-informed mindfulness at that time, and I tried coming back to the breath, but the feeling of kind of despair and isolation was still quite overwhelming. And so I was definitely very much below the window of tolerance. And knowing what I know now, instead of focusing on the breath, I probably would have placed my attention on my feet touching the floor, or place my hand on my heart and placing my attention on that sense of touch, which is a lot more comforting to me. It's easier to access for me than the breath. So that would have given me a bit more stability, and that's something that I use for myself now whenever these moments of difficulties come up. And some specific practices in our tradition that may cause difficulty can include, but are not limited to, silent meditation, body scans, deep relaxations in groups, certain guided meditations like the 5-year-old child meditation, and more. And you'll notice that there's an overlap between these potentially dysregulating practices and the list of nourishing practices from the previous slide. And that's because of our different conditionings, different practices, and even different times in lives. These practices may be either grounding or destabilizing for us. Tay's trademark focus on the breath, for example, is wonderful for many of us, but can be a problem for some if you have abuse histories or lung conditions. And so it might not be a stabilizing enough anchor when we're overwhelmed, like it was for me at the dinner incident at Blue Cliff. So when we get bumped out of our window and stuck in this high or low, the parts of the nervous system that feel safe, calm, that can focus are not available anymore. And instead, the parts that are watching out for our safety or responding to a sense of threat have taken over. But there might not actually be any danger or threat there. So note the words perception and sense of threat, not real threat. So at that time, your nervous system does not know the difference between real and perceived, and it responds to the perceptions. Like me in the dinner, responding to the perception that I was perhaps being abandoned or ostracized in some way by the community when it was not the case. And we have an example of this from Tay, of seeing a rope on the path and mistaking it for a snake and screaming and running inside. And that is a reaction based on a distorted perception. And while your response in Tay's example, while not appropriate for seeing a rope, is highly appropriate for seeing a snake. So your brain and nervous system are designed for survival, and the default being survival. So it's important to remember that when these reactions come up during our meditation and in our practice, we are not failing to practice, and there's nothing wrong with us. But instead, our brain and nervous systems are just doing what they are designed to do and trying to protect us. But when this happens, if you keep trying to do the same thing, our hyperarousal or shutdown may get worse. So for example, if we ask for advice and we're told, just keep practicing, it takes time, just stay with your breath, hold your feelings like a baby, we might feel quite alone and isolated and think that something is wrong with us because we can't follow those instructions at that time. And we may feel ashamed or feel like the practice is not for us and feel like giving up. And so it's very important that to remember that these overwhelming responses can come up quite suddenly and triggered by causes and conditions that we might not be even consciously aware of. And to remember that when that happens, in some ways, our nervous system is trying to help us doing what it's evolved to do. And when that happens, we can switch gears. So using a more stable personal anchor, like feeling your feet on the floor, being aware of Mother Earth supporting you from below, or putting your hand on your heart, or noticing the sounds around you. Or like we just practiced with resourcing, bringing to mind a resource that provides you with a sense of nourishment so that you can come back to the present moment with more space. And with this practice, I'm also reminded of Tay's teaching that practice is like gathering firewood for the winter. So you don't wait until winter comes to go out gathering firewood. And similarly, you don't wait until you become dysregulated and overwhelmed to start trying to figure out what your personal anchor is or what your resource is. We kind of experiment with these practices now and we're in a good space. So we have a nice little first aid kit. We know what to do when we're feeling overwhelmed. And we have a BioBreak slide next, but we can go forward. Thank you. Handing off to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Anne. So you might want to stretch and just move your shoulders a bit and yeah, do what your body needs. So what can we do? How can we make our practice more trauma-informed? The next slide, Eric, please. So there are 5 principles showing on this slide, and it's important to remember that you'll have the recording to come back to, so you don't have to stress too much about taking it all in at once. So the first principle, I'll talk about each one, is to stay in the window. So that's in your own practice and in your own life. Use the skills you have to stay in your window. It means keeping part of your attention on where you are in the window. That was a real eye-opener for me when I did the first study group, and it's been really useful out in the world as well as in practice. The second point is to shift your attention when necessary to support your stability, like we did in the resourcing practice. I find it a bit hard to remember sometimes that I don't have to follow the instructions, but I'm getting better at that. The third point is keep the body in mind, or the mind in the body. So that means when you are drifting off, you can bring your awareness back to just noticing the body, the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, letting them be. Because sometimes we can forget about one of those. The fourth principle is practicing in relationship with others for safety and co-regulation. Knowing that there's others around us who are stable. And for me, this is one of the most important ways. Plum Village practice is different from other traditions. And the last one is to understand the social context. So being aware that because we're in a group practicing together, doesn't mean that we're all going to be thinking the same way about various issues. And especially if it's a group of people who we're really familiar with, it's easy to assume that we all think the same about things. And this makes it hard for people who don't think the same way, and they may well leave. And it makes it hard for newcomers. And there can be power dynamics in a group. So it can be a good idea to organise for affinity groups. So it might be something like a BIPOC group for in the States, that means Black, Indigenous, people of colour, or gender groups, especially for Dharma sharing sessions. And we need to be aware that as a group, we might be contributing to others feeling a sense of oppression or exclusion. So we need to just pay attention to that and act to remedy it if we are. And now Anne will lead the last of our practices in this workshop to support our stability and well-being.
Thank you, Cheryl. So now we'll try a practice called pendulation, which will make use of the first three principles of trauma-informed mindfulness. So as a reminder, those three principles are staying in the window, shifting attention to support stability, and keeping the body in mind, or the mind in the body. And this is kind of a personal favorite of mine. I've come back to this practice many, many times. Often is when I want to look deeply into something that might be unpleasant or difficult, but I'm not completely confident that I can do so without being overwhelmed. So I use this practice of pendulation to shift back and forth between the object that I'm deep looking into and a resource or a stable anchor. And checking with my body to make sure I have enough spaciousness and stability to keep going. So let's get started and see this for ourselves. Shifting, stretching, whatever you need to find yourself in a comfortable position. Enjoying the sound of the bell to start. So settling into your posture. You can have your eyes open or closed, however you are most comfortable. And you can always open or close them later if you want to. Now bring into your mind a mildly distressing, stressful, or annoying situation. Nothing too major, just something mild, like your computer stops doing what you want, or you're on a food line at a retreat and the food runs out just as you get there. So think about your situation for a minute. Now shifting your attention to your body, noticing how your body feels when you bring this situation to mind. Where are the sensations in your body, and what are those sensations? Are they pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant? Just noticing, staying with them for a moment or two. Now shifting in your mind to one of your resources from earlier this session, or bringing your attention to an anchor, like your body in contact with the earth, your back on the chair, perhaps an image in your mind or being in nature, a cup of tea, or sitting with your cat in your lap. And now, while still being with that resource, bring your attention again to noticing the sensations in your body, your chest, your breathing, your heart rate. Is it fast or slow? How do your shoulders feel at this moment? Your face, are they tight or loose? Just noticing and asking yourself gently if the sensations you're noticing are pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant. And if you start to shift back to the negative situation, just noticing that and shifting back to the resource and the anchor, and staying with that for a few more minutes. And now bringing your awareness to your whole body, noticing the sensations, and see if there are any changes that have occurred since we began this exercise. And when you're ready, opening your eyes if they're closed and looking around the room. Situating yourself in your physical space again. Thank you for trying that practice with me. So I want to hear a bit on how it was for you. You can share in the chat what you experienced, and did you notice a difference after shifting from the mildly difficult situation to your resource or anchor? And what was the difference? And you think it would make it easier for you to revisit distressing situations if you use this practice? So feel free to share anything about your experience. Lawrence shared kind of forgot the unpleasant situation. Sarah experienced a shift from annoyance to feelings of well-being and peace. Noticing a difference in the jaw, clenched to relaxed. Less unpleasant bodily sensations. Empowering, relaxing. Yeah, it's good to know that we can take a step back and charge up our battery a bit more before deep looking and practicing with difficult situations. Yeah. Some more sharings came in. The edge came off in the reaction. The situation was also forgotten. Interesting. Calming peace and joy. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So this is a very quick practice. As you notice, we just did it in minutes. So you can do this in your daily life too, when something happens that feels too much in the moment. So I'll pass it on to Cheryl for the next slide.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this practice it's hard to choose, but this is probably one of the most valuable for me. So to be able to know that I can come and go a bit, touch and go. I can be in charge of my emotional state and only handle as much as I feel able to. So now the slide is more tips to stay in the window. And these trauma-informed principles help us to have the stability to be with and transform the mud of suffering, but not avoid the mud altogether. So there are some quick fixes when we notice that we're leaving our window. The trick for me is noticing that and knowing that I can do something about it. So I might take a deep breath with a hand on my belly, or notice how the body feels in contact with surfaces, perhaps the hand on the table, feet on the ground, seat on the cushion. We can focus for a few moments on that sense of grounding and stability before we have to deal with what's in front of us. We can also open our eyes, look at our Sangha friends, and shift our attention to a tree or a bird, change position. We might want to get up and do slow walking instead of sitting meditation, or have a drink of water. We can experiment with what works for us, whether it's from within our practice or whatever else we've come across. So when we notice what's happening inside our bodies and respond in ways to support trauma-informed mindfulness, we can bring ease to our practice and more joy. It's not a spiritual bypass, a way to avoid suffering. The mud's already there, and it's not Plum Village practice to avoid it. But we can name the truth of the suffering, and knowing what works best for us, we can use something else to give us the capacity and stability to look at what's truly going on and to be with and transform that mud. We can't do that transforming when we're dysregulated, and trying harder is not the same as practicing. It took me a long time to learn that. We need to remember too, as it says on the slide, that healing from past experiences takes time, patience, and self-compassion. And we might need additional skills and additional support. What we're doing here is not trauma treatment, but it is offering options within our Plum Village practice to support our healing and well-being. And if you know some practices that help to support you, you could mention those in the chat if you want to. And we can see those as they come in, or we can go back to Anne.
Sure, thanks, Cheryl. Just a summary as we're coming to the end of our workshop here. Things that we'd like you, if you take a few things from this workshop, the things on the slides here are those things. So staying within the window of tolerance will allow us to embrace our strong emotions without getting overwhelmed. So being able to transform the mud instead of perhaps drowning in the mud. And our traditions has many wonderful regulating practices, but those same practices, depending on the person, depending on where they are in life, depending on the external conditions, those same practices might be dysregulating. And if that happens to us, there is nothing wrong with us. We just need to apply the trauma-informed concepts, the practices that we just experienced in the guided meditations, and bring our practice into stability and well-being. So now we still have a few more slides to go, and we have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end. But for a few minutes here, let's reflect on our own takeaway from this workshop. So you can just share one thing that you learned that you'd like to take away to incorporate into your practice. And we do have a bit of time, so if you also like to speak, to share about your takeaway and your experience today, you can also use the raise hand feature and share with the community. But otherwise, you can share in the Zoom chat. The use of anchors. Yeah, time may not heal all wounds, but can be useful. There was a question about the recording, and I believe that will be sent out after the session.
Yes, Kate, if you're part of the Google group for Embrace, we'll send it out through that. And if you're not part of the Google group, you can join, and I'll talk about that later, or you can also just email me directly. Or email embracectc@gmail.com. I'll talk about it in the next slide.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Katie said, takeaway is the reminder that anchors can include body, sound, and sight. Yeah, definitely. It's not just the breath. Yeah, if I can't sit, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me. As a facilitator, to be more open, for sure. Yeah. Lauren, something that we also try to use in the guided meditations is to, here in this session, is to use more open language. So inviting participants, giving them options to open or close their eyes, making the language more open so that they are empowered to not follow instructions if it's not beneficial for them. Charmaine said it's good to know we can support our friends to be more inclusive and understanding of their varied experiences. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think definitely when, I think inevitably as we go deep into the practice, these painful experiences or memories will come up for us. And it's very helpful to have a group to validate that, yes, it happens and it's not an issue. And here are the things that you can do to give yourself safety and support. And especially in Plum Village, you don't have to do it on your own. There's a community, there's the Sangha. Yeah. Rime said inviting and offering choices in our practices. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you. So I'll hand it up to Cheryl.
Thank you. So what's next for us? So we can, in our own practice and within our Sangha sessions, we can explore these concepts for ourselves, work out what works best to support us to be in our window when we're dysregulated for some reason, and ways we can increase the effectiveness in our practice and find more joy in it because we're not stuck in shoulds or in struggle. We can share this information with others so that other people understand that getting bumped out of their window is normal. It's just the nervous system doing what it's designed to do. We're not really weird. The Embrace website, which is on this slide here, contains access to books and articles and talks and videos that are a real treasure trove of resources. And there is a Sangha facilitator training for people after they've gone through a study group if they're leading Sanghas. Study groups usually involve several weeks of Zooms and some reading. So I think, Eric, perhaps, I know that we can sign up for notifications of when study groups and facilitator training are being offered, but I think Eric might have a bit more up-to-date news on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. And so
You have to unmute yourself again.
okay. Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, Anne. And yeah, like I said in the beginning, I don't know if you might remember, it's talking about how the intro workshop is the first step. So either watch the intro workshop, or so you've attended the intro workshop, or for your friends or people who couldn't make it, we'll send out the recording. And so if you're part of the Embrace Google group, you can do that. And I'll also email. And if you're not part of the Embrace Google group, you can join us. You can go onto the Embrace website, and under the Contact Us page, there's ways you can join. Or if you don't want to be part of the Google group for some reason, you could also just email the CTC at embracectc@gmail.com, and we will send over a copy of it. The study groups won't start again until January. And what happened was we were going to start them in the fall, but there was so many people that were interested in doing a study group that were like, oh, okay, we need to reformat and rethink it. So the group is working now and figuring out how to make it more widely accessible so that instead of just like 100 or so people like we did last time, we could maybe do a bigger study groups, because there's a lot of practitioners who are interested in this work. And then also too, we'll be if you get on the listserv, you'll also find out when the Sangha facilitator training is, and that is a training like this. After you do a study group, it would be for people that want to know, how do I facilitate Sanghas in a more trauma-informed way? And so definitely check those out. For the study group, there are some books that are readings for it. One of them is the David Treleaven Trauma-Informed or Trauma-Sensitive Mindfulness book. And I'll also put links to that in the follow-up email that I'll be sending out soon. And then Joanne Rosen, who is one of the founders of Embrace and Dharma teacher, as well as having her book come out. It's called Unshakable, right? Yes. I pre-ordered mine. It'll be coming in soon. It's through Parallax. So yeah, check that out. I'll also put resources to that on the follow-up email and notifications. But on the website too, there's also a lot of list of books and videos that you can get as well. So a lot of exciting stuff. And yeah, thank you for joining in this part of the journey.
Thank you, dear friends. We are open for questions if you have any, either in the chat or... And of course, we are always available through email if any questions come up after the workshop as well.
Yeah. And after the workshop, maybe after we dedicate the merits and talk about the next steps, we can also stop the recording and then stay on for a little bit for people that want to ask like more other questions. We want to preface this that we're not mental health professionals. but we are practitioners who care about this work and have done the study group, so we can offer it through that lens. Katie is asking, are there any plans to evaluate this work? Katie, can you explain to me what you mean by evaluate? Are you talking about doing some sort of research study, or what do you mean exactly? Beneficial on a more than anecdotal basis. Oh, Katie, I think if you go on the trauma sensitive mindfulness book that was the basis of the first and second round of study groups, has a lot of studies that they cite about how this is actually backed by some scientific studies stuff. So yeah, once you find a copy of that book, or even the electronic version, they have that information there. Cool, thank you. And then Carlos is asking, is the Google group a form of conversation or more a place to give information? And it's more of a place to give information. The only people that can post to the Google group are the CTC members. So thanks. Cool. Well, maybe we can go on to the last slide now, and then we'll go from there.
Great. So, yeah, I really have a lot of appreciation for so many people being here today. Thank you for giving your time for this. To close, I'd like to read Ty's poem, The Good News. After that, we'll have questions with the recording off, but you can feel free to leave if you need to. So Ty's poem. They don't publish the good news. The good news is published by us. We have a special edition every moment, and we need you to read it. The good news is that you're alive, and the linden tree is still there, standing firm in the harsh winter. The good news is that you have wonderful eyes to touch the blue sky. The good news is that your child is there before you, and your arms are available. Hugging is possible. They only print what's wrong. Look at each of our special editions. We always offer the things that are not wrong. We want you to benefit from them and help protect them. The dandelion is there by the sidewalk, smiling its wondrous smile, singing the song of eternity. Listen, you have ears that can hear it. Bow your head. Listen to it. Leave behind the world of sorrow and preoccupation and get free. The latest good news is that you can do it. With gratitude to all our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Stop the recording now.
Thank you.
Stay on if you'd like.